curves. They could be dangerous curves. Sometimes it will be sharp, sometimes it will be not sharp, or sometimes it could be anything. So you have to slow your train down to about 30 miles an hour to prevent a disaster. But however, if you're going too fast around the bend, you might derail a train or kill so many passengers. But however, this rule was sadly forgotten on the 19th of April, 1940, at Little Falls Curve. This is a story of the 1940 Little Falls Curve train derailment.
Little Falls is a city in Herkimer County, New York, United States. The population was 4,605 at the time of the 2020 census, which is the second smallest city population in the state, ahead of only the city of Sherrill, too. The city is built on both sides of the Mohawk River, at a point at which rapids had impeded travel upriver. Transportation through the valley was improved by construction of the Erie Canal, completed in 1825, and connecting the Great Lakes with the Hudson River. The city is located at the northeastern corner of the town of Little Falls and is east of Utica. Little Falls has a picturesque location on the slope of a narrow and rocky defile, through which the Mohawk River falls 45 feet, 14 m, in less than a mile, 1.6 km, forming a number of cascades.
On the 19th of April, 1940, the Lakeshore Limited, owned by New York Central, departed Grand Central Terminal at 6:50 a.m. with approximately 250 passengers on board, with a scheduled arrival in Chicago at 1:10 p.m. The train consisted by
NYC 5315 Class J1E 464, locomotive, identity unknown, express car, identity unknown, baggage car Red Ash Pullman sleeping car Poplar Arch Pullman sleeping car Elkhart Valley Pullman sleeper, lounge car Poplar Dome Pullman sleeping car NYC 560 dining car Lake Bruin Pullman sleeping car East Bernard Pullman sleeping car Poplar Lodge Pullman sleeping car St. Gothard Pass Pullman sleeping car East Braintree Pullman sleeping car. Made its first stop in Albany, arriving 14 minutes late, and after switching engines as the original engine was not steaming well, was an additional 7 minutes behind schedule upon leaving Albany at 10:09 p.m. The train was operated by 65-year-old engineer Jesse H.L. 5, who had been an engineer since 1906 and was 1 month from retirement. 6:02. It was proceeding to a stop in Utica, originally scheduled at 11:31 p.m. when it passed Fonda at 11:07 p.m. It was a further 2 minutes behind schedule. It then passed St. Johnsville at 11:25 p.m.
The train was approaching the curve so fast that it entered the curve, and then, all of a sudden, disaster struck.
It derailed in a violent crash at about 11:33 p.m. Engineer Earl initially survived the accident, but died from his injuries before he could be extricated from the wreckage. The accident happened 2,895 feet, 882 m, east of the Little Falls train station, where the tracks run parallel to the north shore of the Mohawk River, on the Gulf Curve, the sharpest curve in the New York Central system, a 7-degree bend, where the speed limit was 45 miles per hour, 72 kilometers per hour. 3:06, a 1903 crash of a newspaper train, consisting of 3 cars of New York City newspapers bound for upstate cities, occurred on the same curve and killed the engineer and fireman. 8, at which time a speed limit was imposed there. Rescuers responded from Little Falls, Herkimer, Utica, Ilion and other nearby towns. Bonfires were set for illumination and acetylene torches were used to free victims. 6. Rescue operations were made more difficult by rain, sleet and snow that began in the early morning hours of the 20th of April. Injured victims were sent to hospitals in Little Falls, Frankfort, Herkimer, Utica and Ilion, as well as to hotels, private homes and churches. The New York State Police estimated that 4,000 people converged at the scene. 7. Wreckage blocked direct vehicular access to the crash site, requiring rescuers to take a 3-mile, 4.8 km, detour between the site and the hospital, a half-mile, 800 m, away. 13. At the state capitol, Governor Herbert H. Lehman directed the state police and public works employees to give all possible aid. 4. The last body was pulled from the wreckage on the 21st of April, 6:30. 5 Chinese nationals en route to San Francisco in the custody of a United States Marshal, who were being deported for entering the U.S. illegally, were in the last car and were uninjured. 7:4. Another source says they were being transported to Canada, from where they entered the U.S. 11. Dozens of other trains were delayed in the days following the wreck. The site was bypassed by routing trains, including the 20th Century Limited, the Commodore Vanderbilt, and the Water Level Limited between Utica and Schenectady over West Shore Railroad tracks. Killed, 26 passengers, 2 Pullman porters, 1 train porter, 2 train service employees injured, 47 passengers, 1 Pullman porter, 2 dining car employees, 1 other employee, 3. The wreck was page 1 news for newspapers across the country. The New York Times gave the story a 2-column headline on page 1 on the 20th of April, and on Sunday, the 21st of April, it was still on the first page with a huge panoramic photograph of the wreck site. 11. Photographs of the crash were published in the 2010 book Images of America Little Fools.
But what caused this?
The train was traveling 74 miles, 119 km per hour before it began to slow down at the curve. A surviving employee in the engine warned the engineer that the train was traveling too fast, but the engineer closed the throttle suddenly instead of applying more braking and the train derailed. The conductor reported that the air brakes were tested at Albany and were working properly. The brakes successfully slowed the train at prior points of required speed reductions. 3. An investigation into the derailment was undertaken by officials of the railroad, inspectors of the Interstate Commerce Commission and the New York State Public Service Commission. 12. In addition to excessive speed, the sudden closing of the throttle contributed to the crash due to effects of momentum of water in the tender, and of the sudden compression of the slack between the cars, both factors causing the engine and tender to jackknife. 3. There was initial speculation that the roadbed may have been weakened by heavy spring rains. 13. But this was not cited in the final report. The track itself was in very good condition, having been laid the prior summer. 3. The crash caused John Crowley, publisher of the local newspaper the Little Falls Evening Times, to advocate through the paper's editorials for the elimination of the sharp curve, where 2 people died decades earlier in the 1903 crash of a newspaper train. Prior attempts were not implemented due to cost. 13. A realignment to reduce the angle of the curve was completed on the 19th of November, 1947, which required diverting the river farther south and filling in the old channel. The 14-month construction project reduced the bend from 7 degrees 24 to 1 degree 30 and allows trains to continue through the bend at normal speed. 6,300 feet, 1,900 m, of roadbed were reconstructed on an embankment averaging 65 feet, 20 m, in height, separating the roadbed from the river, creating a 20 feet, 6.1 m, deep, 150 feet, 46 m, wide new channel for the river. Required blasting and excavation of 138,000 cubic yards, 106,000 m3, of rock and was the largest part of the project. The project cost $2.5 million. According to the railroad, the improvement was planned immediately after the accident, but due to shortages of material and manpower caused by World War II, the project was postponed until the end of the war. Prior to this crash, the New York Central had gone 13 years without a passenger fatality. The year before, it had received the Harriman Award, an annual award presented to American railroad companies in recognition of outstanding safety achievements. There was speculation that Engineer Earl, a senior engineer with an excellent record, exceeded the speed limit on the curve because of the competitive pressure the passenger railroads were receiving from the airlines. 16. He may also have been worried about being put further behind schedule once reaching Utica because one of the Pullman cars, with passengers destined for the northern New York towns of Saranac Lake and Lake Placid, would have to be switched out of the train there to join a different northbound Adirondack Division train. A memorial marker was erected by the Gulf Curve chapter of the National Railway Historical Society in 1990 at the junction of River Road and Route 5, mounted to a boulder.
But that wasn't the only time a train derailed in Little Falls Curve. In 1903, a train derailed in Little Falls Grove again. Maybe I'll do a documentary in the future of this train crash. But anyways, it's been 85 years since the derailment, and hopefully we'll never see another train derailment like on Little Falls Curve the same way again.